Howdy, howdy, howdy. Good evening, Alex. Alex, what's up, 1K? Yeah, they bought Discover, I believe, right? It's probably going to be a gap down in the morning for them. Yeah, we could take a look. Oh, right at the top of this broad information. Who would have thought? Welcome, 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 Jay, Laurel, Marcel, Paz, 1K again, because that's what you was in the list. Isaiah, Alex, and Alex. G, what's up? I'm guessing it's probably going to be a gap down for Capital One. Discover will be the gap up. Now, what's interesting is if anybody knew this was coming, that's a nice setup on Discover, too. Be interesting to see if anybody knew this was coming. Well, we got time here for people to roll in. We'll take a look at the options chain, even DFS. Let's see. Not a whole lot of activity on Friday. Looks like someone is along the 110 calls for March 15th. What's up, Ricky? But those are already in the money. Nothing in the current options chain would indicate to me that anybody knew DFS was going to get bought out. Let's check out Capital One's flow. Someone took profit on puts, or at least got rid of them. A decent amount of put activity. Looks like they longed the 115 puts and shorted the 120 puts. They're looking forward to end up in this window, I guess. So it'll be interesting to see if that happens. Yep, all eyes on Nvidia this week. Probably too many eyes for my liking. Premiums are going to be jacked up on that thing. Um, but yes, and I do believe we still have some big earnings other than them, right? We got Palo Alto Networks, Walmart, Home Depot, Medtronic, Barclays, Rivian, which I'm assuming is just going to be puts. Etsy, Lucid, which I'm also assuming is going to be puts. APA, got some other banks coming through as well. Nikola, most likely puts as well. Moderna, Block, Carvana, Intuit. Yeah, so not like mega caps, but still some big boys out there reporting this week. All right, it's 7:33. This is the Sunday Night Market Scan. My name is Joe. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. This is the part of the week where I look through all the tickers that are the bigger ones in the S&P and I give my opinion on them. That doesn't necessarily mean that it is financial advice or buy or sell signals or anything like that. If I see what I think would make a good trade, I put it on a chart. You can do whatever you want. You're responsible for your own actions. Yeah. All right. With that being said, let's take a look at the market. I'm going to start with my usual like 10 stocks in the S&P. And going to go from there. All right. Anyway, Apple. Sorry, my kid was coming down. I was listening to him. All right, so Apple. We were looking for a long. I was looking for a long. Really wanted to see it come back up to 200, and it just has not done it. I'm pretty sure this long is invalid at this point. Apple is feeling heavy. It looks like it wants to come down, and this is the trade that we were watching. I do believe last week, coming under this weekly right here. And that was a really nice trade. It still hasn't panned out completely to the 179 and a quarter, but that was the price that we were watching, which also happened to line up with the 50% mark of the previous week. So as it dropped below that price, it dropped below, pulled back up, rejected, and then continued to go. Even came back up and tried it again and still got rejected. So I have a pretty good feeling Apple's going to at least 179 this week, maybe not a little bit more. But Apple's feeling definitely bearish based on that weekly setup that we were watching last week. So I'm looking for continuation into this gap. Maybe we're going to fill out this gap a little bit more. But we do have the 3 gap in play for Apple, getting the pullback after the exhaustion. And it seems to be panning out quite nicely. So looking for a pullback further downside, 179, 178 on Apple. Let's see. These were all in order, and now they are not, and that's annoying me. Amazon took out the highs and the lows of the previous week last week. So that long did not pan out, and it didn't. It just gapped below my entry, and then that was that. So that one's done for. Got a lot of gaps around here. We're pretty much ranged up at this area. You can see that right here. No bodies are closing below into this gap. They're all closing back up. We're just going to chop, I assume. And basically for something like Amazon, this would be, I'd watch this for a break of a close in this gap is what I would watch for. So this right here, this big gap on the daily. This is what I would look for. If Amazon gets a close into there, I'd look for further down pressure to fill this gap. If it continues just to wick in there and bounce back out, that's not really a trade that I'd want to take. We're just going to be ranged. Technically, you would trade that back up to like the 176 area, 175, 176, somewhere in there, back to the top of the range, and trade this up. See what I'm saying? And wait for a break of this range. So that is a possibility. If you're a range trader or a breakout trader, depending on what you're looking at. I personally wouldn't bother trading Amazon right now. Amazon or AMD got the breakout. Now it's getting the retest. I'd look for a push up here on AMD this week. It's feeling bullish. I want to see it try and take out this previous high at 184, 185, whatever that high is there. I'd look for a stop probably right around there. Give me a nice 3 to 1 risk reward. But AMD is going to go with wherever NVIDIA goes this week. So you could probably trade AMD on a sympathy for NVIDIA because NVIDIA's premiums are going to be jacked. IV is going to be jacked. AMD's is going to be high too, but not nearly as high as NVIDIA. So if you want to trade NVIDIA earnings, AMD might be something you want to look at to trade NVIDIA earnings. All right, let's see. trying to figure out where this list went. Boeing channeling down to the downside here, broke the trend, hit the downside of this channel. I would assume it's going to bounce back up. But if we're not trending, we're ranged, and a channel is just another range as it bounces in this monthly gap here. So that's what I would assume it's going to do as it continues to fill out this gap from the monthly chart. So I'd look for a bounce back up to around 213 and then a continuation down to 200. What's up, Joe? Welcome to everybody else. Is that L Brooks I see there? Hi, L. Coin has been on a rippery-do. I was looking for a short because I didn't think it was going to happen. I really wanted to see coin return to 70. I have been completely wrong in that, and it went right back up to 187. So where this goes from here, I mean, long term here, really looking forward to push into this gap, and that is where I would take my short. It's got this gap here from the monthly, and this would be your L Brooks gap. This would be the breakaway gap. Actually, this would be the breakaway gap. This would be the measuring. This would be the exhaustion. And now we're getting the turnaround back into that break or that measuring gap. So we already got, I'm pretty sure we got the price extension on this. I'll do a little measuring. So yeah, we already got the price extension on this. So there it is. I'm looking for the pullback. That's where I would short for a continuation, in my opinion, is that gap right there. So right around 226. Now I'm not looking for a full reversal here. I'm not looking for anything crazy, but it pushed above this gap here, came back down, and then pushed back out of it. So I would look for it in continuation up in around 225, 228. I really like that midpoint there for an entry, and then look for a short as it's currently laid out here. Short down to this gap. Not looking for new lows or anything like that. So keeping an eye on coin and Bitcoin as well. Disney getting the break out of the channel. So now we have a trend, a break in price action. We're getting the push up. We trended down into a nice channel, and now we're getting the reversal back out of it as we bounce off of October COVID lows, or October 2014 and COVID lows here. I mean, this is looking really nice here. Disney having a really good month. The nice break to the upside. Looks like we got a gap there that we're watching. The long panned out, got the nice gap up. Volume is dying off as we're hitting new highs. So I would expect a pullback here. See if we can see something of note. I do like that wick. I do like that for another bounce. So we'll see if it can come back down into 107. I'd look for a little bit bearish action on Disney this weekend at 107. Google really getting this pullback. They had some news off of OpenAI, I believe. But this has already been extended out quite a bit. So still looking for this pullback, and I think we're starting to get it now. Let's take a look at the monthly. Some high wicks there. Hit a new high. Pulled back. I'm assuming that's going to pull back at least into this exhaustion gap. Right here. And this is a longer term setup on this Google here. So this isn't like, I wouldn't be looking for this to go from 140 to 128 in a single day. It could happen. I doubt it though. So, but I would look for this to come down and maybe take a short under the previous month's low here. You'll look at the weekly. after I just go away. How about that? So we did break the previous week's low, pushing down. I wouldn't mind getting into a short here, looking for a continuation into that exhaustion gap. Maybe use the halfway point of that wick there. It's only a 1.9 to basically a 2-to-1 reward. It's not the greatest, but it's there, if you ask me. Could even use the previous week's low here as a stop to increase the risk reward. I'll get there, Alex. So Google, I'm looking for a pullback into this exhaustion gap, possibly pulling back further into this measuring gap. And then here's a breakout gap. Whether or not it goes all the way to the breakout gap, I doubt, but we'll see. I think Google has a leg up, honestly, on the AI thing. And I think they could be someone to be reckoned with going forward. They have the money to do basically whatever they want. So keeping an eye on Google, looking for a pullback, bearish this week. Goldman, broadening formation. Banks feeling a little wonky here with Goldman pushing up into newer highs, keeps pulling back down, can't get the close over this previous high. I would expect it to pull back into like the 380s or 360s or so. But this is pretty, I mean, just that price action on the weekly there. We took out the highs and the lows of last week and ended basically right at the high of the previous week. So we ended flat 2 weeks in a row and took out the highs and the lows. So I think banks are looking to make a move here, or at least Goldman is. Either up or down is beyond me. Broadening formations at the top of a move like this tend to be bearish. So we'll see if it gets a break below that and a push down. Intel got the break out of the channel, the push back down, and now bouncing at that gap, which is fantastic. Really nice setup. Is that on the daily? It's got to be on the weekly. Yep. Really nice setup here. So breakaway. And then we got the measuring. And then we got the exhaustion gap. And then we gapped down. So I would actually want to see a pull up into this gap for a bigger short to the downside. That's how I'm feeling on Intel right now. Unless they have some news. Just a heads up, a forewarning with NVIDIA earnings and all eyes being on them. Semiconductors are going to be very, very touchy this week. So I would be very hesitant to swing anything that you can't risk going to zero overnight, just because of how volatile semiconductors are going to be this week, especially with SMCI. If that actually continues to dump, it could get pretty crazy. So just keep that in your mind while you're trading semiconductors, that it could get a little crazy, you know? Sure. So, yeah, Soxel would be a good one. So the way this works is the high of this candle here and the low of this candle here, there's a gap between them. Okay. This would be considered, this is called a trend bar gap, according to Mr. Al Brooks, who we apparently have here in the chat. Trend bar gaps are basically showing prices showing strength. Okay. And you get a gap between the previous candle and the subsequent candles, high and low. It's considered an area of inefficiency for price. Price tends to move into those areas. And Al Brooks teaches a three gap theory where you have a breakaway gap, which you see price breaking out over a high, which we have here. So price broke out with a trend bar gap over this high right here. So it's pushing up. So there's a breakaway gap. Then we got the second gap, which would be the measuring gap. And then the third gap, which is the exhaustion gap. And after that, you look for a reversal. The way that this can be traded lots of different ways. The way I prefer to trade it is to wait for the second gap to get the measuring gap and look for a retracement into that gap for the push up to the third gap. And that's exactly what happened here. We got the pullback into the measuring gap here. And I'll delete this. With this measuring gap, after we got the breakaway, price came up, got small body candles, got the pullback right into it, right into that 50. That dotted line there is the 50% mark of that gap. So I would take a long. I'd set my stop at the bottom, maybe just under the gap, and I would aim for the price target. So now the price target is going to be, this is how you find the price target on these. I'll take a look at cost. Put that on the list. So here's how you set the price target on this setup. I'll take a line, just a regular line tool here. And I'm going to go from the low before the breakaway gap here. And I'm going to bring it up to the center of the measuring gap. That dotted line right there. So there's that line. I'll change the color to something bright, or maybe not because I have a white background. Change the color to something you can see, right? And I'll even, wow, click the line, Joe. And it'll make it nice and thick. And then I'll just hold Alt here on TradingView and it duplicates the line. And then I'm going to line up the bottom of that with the midline for the measuring gap. And that is how you would project a target. And then that's where price went. Now this is a weekly chart. So you're looking at, you got to buy time. Okay. This happened over the course of 4 weeks. So an entire month. Now, if you end up getting like 50 calls when it bounces here at 41, and you only get like 30 days on those calls, by the time it gets up to 50, theta is going to deteriorate that call quite a bit. And it's not going to be worth probably much. It could be. Every stock is different. All the IVs are different. All the calculations are different. But I would look for a target strike, so around the 50 mark here in this scenario, and I would look for at least 60 days on a weekly chart, if not more. 90 would be preferable, but at that point, you could be well above the size of your portfolio for a favorable trade. So if I'm trading $500 and this contract, a 50 contract with 2 to 3 months out, is going to be $100 or $200 a contract, I'm not going to trade that. That's way too much of my portfolio to put into a single trade. I'm looking for at least on a swing, at least, or at max, maybe 10%. That's what I'd be looking for. But that's how this setup works. Okay. So you look for the breakaway gap. I would look for the measuring gap. I'd look for the pullback into that measuring gap and then the push to extension based on the previous swing low to the middle of that measuring gap, if that makes sense. And this will be available for watching. I'll post the YouTube link in the Discord once it's all uploaded and ready to go, and you can watch it on the YouTube channel as well. But that's how I would trade the Al Brooks 3-gap system. All right. The frequency, honestly, it just looked as beautiful as it did here. There's a lot of times, so right now there's another one. I don't remember which one it is right offhand, but it never got the retrace into the measuring gap until after the exhaustion gap. So I didn't take the trade, but like price it didn't retrace here, just kept going up, and then finally got the exhaustion gap, came down into the measuring gap after the move, and then rocketed up. So as far as like the frequency of it being exactly at 50, hard to say. That's not something I've back tested or looked into back testing, but I really like the 50% for a lower or a higher risk to reward, essentially. I could take it at the beginning of the gap, but that would increase my risk quite a bit, in my opinion. I could watch some levels. Really, I would rather it just come to the center of the gap, and then that's when I would take my trade. If it doesn't get there, it doesn't get there. I move on to the next trade type of thing. So that's Intel. What do we got next here? The big ones. Coke. Coke had ER, right? They did. They had a favorable ER, and price is just chopping along sideways here. Not really looking the greatest for the Cokester in this big gap right here. So let's see. It got. Yeah, I'm just gonna clean some of this up here. So we got the break below this trend, and sorry, I'm just gonna got the break below this trend with a trend bar gap, big hammer into that volume imbalance, which I think is from the weekly. Is that from the weekly down here? No, this trend bar gap from the weekly here, not a volume imbalance. These gap colors are a little old. On the monthly chart. So we got a monthly breakout to the downside on Coke with a bounce on a weekly level. So bounced on the weekly, pushed up, and it can't get the close over 60. Like it just doesn't want to go. So I'd actually feel bearish if we only have a few days, well, not a few days. We have a week and a half left in February. So if it doesn't get the close, Coke for me, if it doesn't get the close above that 59.81 price, I would look bearish going into next month. Now looking at a weekly chart, it's getting the close and then the pullback, the close and then the pullback. So there's a lot of animosity over this line. There's a lot of uncertainty, and now we're ranging as we push up to it. So we've got a nice little range here forming on Coke. So maybe it sits here in a chop sideways just under 60, but I would look for this on a monthly chart, a bigger time frame. If it can't get that close over, I'll call it 60. If it can't get the close over 60 by the end of the month, I'd look for a bearish move back down to 52, 53 on Coke. As far as like if this is something that somebody wanted to day trade, I mean, Coke, in my opinion, is not something that I would want to day trade just because it's so slow and it's moving. It's such a heavy stock. It's got a very large float, and it moves a lot. So, not something that I would bother day trading, but definitely something I would look to swing trade. And if it can't get that close over 60 by the end of the month, I'd look for a larger dump to the downside on Coke. Meta to the moon. Meta to the moon. That's all I can tell you. Meta to the moon. I greatly dislike this company and this company's distaste for treating its customers properly. But that's just my personal view. As far as the stock itself and the company itself, they're gonna be popular. Yeah, billions. I'll get to Tesla here in a minute. There has been a ridiculous amount of flow by a very large whale going into Meta. They had 600 calls that they bought a year ago, and they just pushed them out to 950 calls for 2026. So I know volume is dying off here on the monthly. It's probably dying off on the weekly too. We did get a little bump here. I mean, I would look for a pullback into 400 probably, but that's when I would definitely look at triggering along on Meta, because the price action on this thing just is screaming, buy me and hold on to me. Like I personally think that I would be just fine grabbing shares even here at 473. And in a year, 2 years, 3 years, I'd be just fine. Doesn't matter. So, granted, I would definitely leave room to buy more if possible. I'm not going to YOLO the whole port at 400, but this is price action that we saw with Nvidia. So we got the nice big run up, and then their big earnings uh, got the big gap up here, and it stayed there the whole time. It stayed there the whole time until it went parabolic yet again. So Nvidia was ranged here, got the break out of the range, the push up, the ridiculous price, three gaps. Oh, excuse me. Three gaps here, going, gone. You know, boom, boom. Here's the exhaustion gap. So here's the breakaway gap. Here's a situation where price did not retrace into the measuring gap. You're welcome. Here's a situation where price did not retrace into the measuring gap. It just kept going. Like it hasn't stopped. And volume is still up on Nvidia. But I mean, we're three gaps up now. We were three gaps up here, and price stayed and then continued. So we're three gaps up here again on the weekly. We might see Nvidia range here, and we might see it, sit up here for a little bit. It could pull back too. Like the possibilities are there for both scenarios. So this is definitely something that I would not really be trading because of where Nvidia is. Look at where it's come. Okay. Look at how far it's come since 111. Like we're up at 726 at this point. It hasn't stopped. So as far as timing a pullback or timing a continuation, I tried to time continuation here, but it never even hit the entry. So it's just going to keep going, in my opinion. It's either going to keep going or chop and then keep going. So maybe Nvidia gets a pullback to, 673. If we break this to the downside, if we break this range, here, going to go to the daily, and we're ranging up here from this last gap up here. See? If we come back down to like 677, like maybe they have a quote unquote bad earnings or whatever this week, that would be fine if we stay above this price target and above this range, above this previous breakout here. If it goes below, let's call it 670, then I would look for more of a pullback into these other gaps. Maybe get for a pullback down here around 568. But and the price action on this thing is ridiculous. So let's check the rest of the big headers in the S&P. Netflix pushing to 600, trying to pulling back. This is something that we were kind of watching, kind of not watching. It's getting the gaps. It's getting the push. Another big gap here. I think it's going to keep going. Netflix showing some definite strength here. I'm looking for a possible short around the 618, but it just never happened and it jumped over it. So Netflix showing strength as well. And Roku's usually another one. Roku hasn't got to that price target, unfortunately. So now we got the pullback. And now we're in a monthly breakaway gap that we just closed to the downside of, bouncing in a weekly gap right at the 50% mark. So this would actually be a nice place, in my opinion, for a long this week and see if we can't get the push back up to that price target. That is a lot of sell volume. So keep that in mind. But this would be a low risk to reward here, in my opinion, on something like Roku. No, don't full port anything. Full porting is stupid. Don't do it. Google just went over it. I'm looking short into this exhaustion gap around 125 for a possible long again on Google. That's on a weekly chart. As far as a daily chart, um, I mean, it feels like it wants to come down, so I would just like short, short any pump, in my opinion, as long as it doesn't break this trend line. Every time it gets a push into that trend line, I just buy some puts and see what happens. And what else do we usually go for the rest of the S&P? I think that's about it. So let's do the requests. NIO, man. Yeah, I'll get to the indexes here. Sorry about that. NIO is, I mean, I feel like this would be a good place to pick up shares and sit on them, but I haven't heard anything about them moving into the US. Uh, Tesla has been making ground in China, but they've got their own issues here, you know, with Elon and wanting more money, threatening to leave. I mean, if I if I look up here, you know, it kind of looks like a loose inverted head and shoulders setting up, but you could make this argument, right? This argument could be made. Okay. So, I mean, a break over 6.5 for a move into the sevens with a stop around 6 for a possible trade. It might be something that I would be willing to look into. It's not the greatest risk to reward, but it's there. Maybe try and get around 630, make it a bit better, more worth the time. Lucid, I'm essentially bearish on. I mean, I can't think of a reason why this stock would continue going up. It hasn't done anything except go down. It's clearly in a downtrend. I would just stick with a trend on Lucid. Delta Airlines is in this nice pennant that we've been watching here for a little bit. It hasn't broken out yet. It's something that I would be watching for a breakout this week, either to the upside or to the downside. On down. Costs, setting up for a long here. This is a longer term 3-gap setup on not this one. Is it the monthly that we have it? No. So this is the monthly. Here's the breakaway gap, the measuring gap, the price. Looking for a long here up to around 766. This is on a monthly chart, so you know you're looking at like 2 months of time on cost. VRT Norbert says they want 70. I still feel bearish on it, but it hasn't given me anything. On this monthly chart, we actually got finally, we're working on it. We haven't gotten there yet. But if it finishes this month, that would give us an exhaustion gap, and I'd be looking for a reversal. PayPal? No. Um, you're looking at longs. I mean, it had that head and shoulders setting up there. I mean, you could say that, you know, it's kind of here now, but it's already put in a lower low below the left shoulder. I mean, I just don't like it. Their CEO had came out with you know, we're gonna do this and blah blah blue, you know, and I mean the market doesn't seem to care. So I could be wrong, and we could see PayPal break out to new highs, but I don't see it in my opinion. Small cap semis outperforming SPY, probably. It's going to depend a lot on what happens with Taiwan and our domestic semiconductor production. If you are a person who watches politicians, I'd be watching the well-known trading politicians for what they're buying. See if they're buying semiconductor companies in the small cap area. Norbert specifically likes VRT. I think it wants to make a pullback, but that's me. I don't know anything financially about this company. It's all I know is the chart, and the chart is in a parabolic move, and it's in a really high parabolic move with volume dying off. So you can look up politicians trading. You can specifically insider trading. I don't know about insider trading. That's something that is beyond me. But politicians have to file all their trades publicly. They don't do it on time, of course. But you can look at unusual whales for the political trading. I do believe they post all their politician trades publicly for free, so you don't need a subscription. So unusualwhales.com. Looking at ALGM here, hasn't been able to get over that volume imbalance here in the monthly. Let's take a look at the weekly. Right there. Can't close the deal. Okay. Until it gets over that, I'd look for, like, if it can get a close over that area, call it 32. I'd look for a nice push into 37s. Maybe set a stop right there. It's got to get the close though. If it doesn't get the close, I don't want it, you know. Planeteer off to the races. Off to the races with this one. Here's another great setup here, the 3-gap setup. Never got the retrace, and then it ranged over that. Now we got the breakaway gap, the pull into the breakaway gap, the hold of the 50, now the rocket. Now we've got a measuring gap here. So this was a really nice one here where this is not the measuring gap. This would be the measuring gap. It can go there. I don't know what that was. But got the pull in. Actually would probably stopped me out, but it chopped and then got the rip up. So as far as a target, bing to boom. Really? Duplicate, push up. Looking for a target. That's pretty much there, right around 26. Right. So a setup I look for, I'll go over it again here pretty quick, and you can watch it in replay. But there is a gap here between the. You know what? You can just check out the recording. I'll post the link. I went over exactly what setups I'm looking at, how this setup I'm looking at works, and it'll be available before the end of the night, most likely. Subtile. Let's see, what else do we have? Indexes, SPY, Spiddly SPY. So we hit the price target on the weekly with the 3 gaps. Hit the price target, and now this 515 price target out here is from the monthly. So we're working on 3 gaps right now over the all-time highs. I think SPY is going to try for 515, 516, and we'll see if it wants to range when it gets above there or if it rejects and then pulls back. QQQ is very similar situation on the Qs, except they've been moving a little bit faster. Gap, 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 range, gap, gap, ranging. So I think Nvidia is going to be what pushes or drags down the market this week, in my opinion. So keeping an eye on that. In addition, looking at this, I mean, SPY is the same way as the Qs here, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 weeks, and only 2 of them have been red on SPY. So this is a ridiculous move to the upside. This doesn't happen on the S&P 500. As a matter of fact, the last time it happened was before COVID hit. And before that, it was somewhere around, I want to say before the 2008 financial crisis was the last time SPY was that green. Maybe around 2007, 2006. So when the market goes on such a rip like this, there tends to be some possible drawbacks when it comes around. What is IGV, dude? I don't. Tech software sector ETF. Does this thing have any options, volume at all? Never heard of this ETF. I mean, I feel like it wants that 450 price, but definitely feels like it wants a 450 price. Volume dying on the weekly though, so if it can get over and then stay there, great. I'd look for some more upside. But as volume is dying off here, I'd look for a rejection and a possible pullback. Maybe a handle setup, cup and handle type of setup. SMCI, I'm expecting downside this week. Pan Dubs going on a ripperoonie inside week last week. So I'd look for a break of last week's high or low to a move to the previous week's high or low. That's what I would be looking at on Pan. So look for something like that or something like this, which the upside is clearly a much smaller trade. So you'd adjust the trade accordingly out of that. Yeah, I know. How did the other ones do, crowd? They've got their ER coming up, so they haven't done theirs yet. What are the other D-Dog? They just had their earnings holding nicely up here in this channel. Continuing upward. I'd look for a long on D-Dog here. Look for a long back up to I'd want to see it 140. See it hit 140. These contracts are expensive, though. I wouldn't expect a whole lot of people to be able to trade this. It's not necessarily something that I would want to trade either, but the trade is there. I'd day trade that and day trade the weekly contracts. I saw a target up there. Target sitting here, nice ranged. I'd be looking for a short as it gets closer to 150, 160. This is a setup that I really like. I think it could get a nice rejection there. So I'd look for a push into 150, 163 for a short. APTV. This definitely feels like it wants to come back down to 29 and 3/4. They being rough. What do I make of the news of Capital One trying to buy Discover? With most buyouts, you'd see a drop in the company buying and a increase in the company being bought. As far as how it affects XLF, it'd probably just be a probably wouldn't change much, honestly. And I mean, this is just some random penny stock, bro. I don't know anything about this company. This chart looks like a parabolic move to the upside, and then now it's coming back down. If past is any proof of concept, it's going to push up and then come back. So maybe a short around 18. But yeah, I don't even know what this company does or what their financials look like, and that's not really something I'm going to go into tonight. ENPH and energy got the bounce at 168 and getting the push back into that 139 area. We'll see what happens when it gets there. But the long trade is panning out as we speak here. What it does after that, I don't know. Yeah. So this was the trade. Long trade is panning out. We'll see what happens when it gets there. If it wants to break above and chop and get itself ranged, that's what I would look for. And then I'd look for a break of that range, either to the upside or to the downside. If it goes through, Steven, buyouts are a little bit trickier for banks. So just keep that in mind. They could easily put the kibosh on it. AVGO, I think we already checked out, but looking for basically continuation to the upside. This thing, I'm sorry, we did not check this out. But I mean, it's one of those Broadcom semiconductor stocks that are just probably going to keep going. Tesla is at the bottom of this channel, looking for a pushback to the top side. This is the setup that we were watching from the weekly. I was looking for a long as it pushed into 175, or basically pushed below 180 into 175, and we got the long. Now we're getting the reversal here on the weekly, and it did get the stop of this gap, but I would still expect it to try and push up to the top side here. Gold Barrick. This one I think is going to continue down. There's been some options flow on this thing that would indicate that this is going to continue going down. I would look for it to at least push to this low, around 12 and 3/4, 1265 or so. But the options flow that I've seen from Gold Barrick would suggest that it wants to continue down. Sound. It's an 8-cent stock. I don't care. Target. AVG open. Open Door Technologies. There has been some strong call volume on open over the past few weeks. It is basically setting up nicely here. Ooh. Boom. And boom skis. Actually, let's go from this low right here. Setting up range. Now we're just getting a tighter range. Every triangle is a range. Every rectangle is a range. It's just a different kind of structure. You know? So looking for it to get tighter. And maybe look for a push into like 2.5, 260 before a push back up to 4. But ideally, this would be more of a breakout trade. I would look for a breakout above or below those trend lines before taking a trade. SOUN, yeah, probably. SOUN, I've got some shares. I think it wants 5 to 6. SoFi getting nice and cozy up there. Let's take a look at the larger time frame on SoFi. Inside month last month. Now this is an interesting trade here. So let's take this, project it out, give the 50% mark. We poked the 50 and then pulled back. So 850, we'll call it 850. I would like to see a push over 850. And it continued. Well, we already pushed into there and pulled back, and then we Dinged it right now. I'd watch that trend line for a breakout. It's not something that I would take early, but I would watch that trend line for a breakout. Yeah, I'm not checking out these nuts. All right. I'm sorry. Baba. The break to the downside, the channel to the downside. I think it's going to continue down, honestly. We're watching that pennant there. Now it's getting the breakdown. I think it at least wants these last lows. Is that all time low? No, not all time low yet. All time low is down here. So I think it might want all time lows. That's my opinion on Baba. IWM looking like it wants to push up. Small caps looking like they want to push up. This is one of my favorite price actions here. Get a nice push up, an inside bar, and then the push above the inside bar to the previous high. I think it wants to continue up. And I was watching it here, and I said if it pushes up, look for a push up above this high, and then a dump to the downside, or a push down below that low to rip to the upside. So it looks like the first thing, the purple line here is panning out. I'd look for a push into 214, and we'll see if it wants what it wants to do when it gets there. But I would oh my goodness, I'd expect a pullback in small caps based on the chart. That's just my opinion. And then the diamonds are in rip mode. So just like SPY and the Qs, they're going on up. Hasbro monthly. This feels very bearish. Let's take a look at the weekly. I mean, look how much buy volume came through, and look how little price bothered moving last week. Push down, buy up, no more volume up here. This looks like almost like a vacuum, right? Like there were no more buyers or sellers up here, so they had to push price all the way down just to get them to bring it back up. But for right now, I mean, this is pretty ranged. It's got a gap here that it's trying to fill. So maybe maybe they had to push it all the way down here to get these orders to get it to come back up. So you're looking at, maybe 56, 60. But here's another 3 gap setup here. So got the extension, the exhaustion, pulling back into the exhaustion. Hasn't quite reversed yet. I'd look for a close over 51, call it 51 and 3/4. That'd be a nice solid, maybe even 52. Get a close over 52 for a reversal up into the 60s. Zom's going to be susceptible to oil, still very ranged, bouncing back up here. This would be a nice place to take a long, in my opinion, for a push back up into the 120s. Be a nice place for a stop. Keep a nice low stop here. Nice swing option here on Zom. That's my take on that. Let's see, actually. So we're up here. Let's get the risk reward a little bit more accurate. MPC moving on up. Moving on up to the side. Yeah, I said a big channel to the upside. I assume it's going to continue to the upside. Just keeps on moving. It's at the top of the channel, so it might get a pullback into like the 150s or so. But definitely looks like it wants to keep moving. AMC 0. Next. Anybody got anything else? All right, let's take a look at futures before we go, and then we'll end it. S&P 500 dropping out pretty hard there. Let's check out the Qs. Exact same thing, pushing down below the lows from Friday. So, and those all-time highs that we've been consolidating over. Wouldn't mind seeing a push up, a bounce this morning. So we'll see how that works out. Let's take a look at oil. Nice and high right up there, looking like it wants to break out to over 78. And if we have higher inflationary issues that we were not expecting, I mean, oil got the big rip up. If I switch out to the daily here, oil got the big rip up as we were coming into the CPI and the PPI data. And the reason is that oil is an inflationary hedge. Okay. So if the market is expecting inflation to be an issue, they're going to put money in oil because it's a safe bet. So if we see oil break out above these basically 79, 60, I think we could definitely see a big push up into the 80s, and we're going to see higher prices in gas as a result of that, which is also going to affect your FedExes and your UPSs as well. And then we'll take a look at Mara, and then we will be done. Let's just take a look at Bitcoin and see what it's doing. Dip to the downside there below those lows, popping back up. Feels like it wants to come back up, but it is in a downtrend. At least on the shorter time, on the shorter down. Oh my good Lord. Shorter downtrend here. So if it can break above this hourly candle, I'd look for a move up into this. Oh, why is this doing this? Here we go. Break over this hourly. Nice big wick there. If we can get a break over that, I'd look for a push into this trend around 5,100, which is going to be calls for Mara. A push into probably 29.30 for Mara on that candle. We'll see what happens. Arm's I like that company. Is one of those semiconductor companies that I would like. There was the setup that we were watching, the break above this to the push to this high, and it just ripped, came down, found support at that rip, and now we're just continuing up and it's ranged. So still looking for some upside on ARM as well. And if you notice, SMCI took the big dump there. ARM did not. They took a hit, but nowhere near is what SMCI did. So I think we'd probably see some upside back in the 138s, 140s for ARM. All right. 40 to 1,000. Yeah. ARM was one of those sleepers that people were not looking at. Some people were looking at, but right. All right. You guys have yourself a good night, and think of something to be grateful for. Write it down. Keep it by your desk. Keep it on you at all times. Remember it. Be thankful for something this week. All right. Don't forget to be grateful. You are currently doing something where you get to sit at a keyboard and click stuff and make or break money, right? Nowhere else in the world can I sit down and make $1,000 with a click of a mouse. So be grateful that you have this opportunity. Make sure you are studying. Make sure you are putting forth effort into learning these things, okay? And if you ever have any questions, ask our team. We're here in the Discord for a reason. If you have, something that really needs a little bit more one-on-one hand time, feel free to grab somebody and ask if they can go one-on-one. They might not be able to, but I bet you they can find someone who can. Okay. And yeah. When I post the link to this video, you can go back, you can check out the 3-gap system that I use. I explained it at the beginning. I'll even put probably a note in the YouTube video so you can just click right to it and you don't have to worry about it trying to find it. All right. Everybody have a good night, and I will see you in the Discord.